So this is my Zedruu the Greathearted commander deck, and I built this one in response to all of those Feldigriff group hug decks that I had to play against. And the reason I wasn't crazy about those decks is that they didn't really moderate the board like I felt a group hug deck should. They sort of just did stuff like Prosperity for 20 into Tempting Worm, or Font of Mythos and Eladamri's Vineyard. I didn't really think cards like that were fun. I thought they just sort of turned the game into a chaos state, and then the players with good decks just ended up in even better positions, and they just sort of wiped the floor with the rest of the table. So those decks didn't really moderate the board and make the game more fun. It just sort of, completely dominated the game and forced people to play in ways that the decks weren't supposed to play with. So then when they printed Zedruu, I thought this would be a really good opportunity to try out my idea of a policeman deck. And a policeman deck is just supposed to not try to win the game, but sort of moderate the board in a way that doesn't let any other player run away with the game too soon. So the idea of this deck isn't to actually win the game, but to keep the game going at a nice pace, don't let anyone get eliminated too early, and try to keep everything fair. So this deck has a ton of control elements, lots of counter magic, lots of removal, and I definitely built around Zedruu's Donate effect because that's a really fun ability, and that sort of lets me execute some of my capital punishment. Like a policeman, you really have to enforce your laws, but if someone's not following them, then you can punish them appropriately. So, you might be interested in this deck if you're building Zedruu, but if you're trying to build Zedruu as a competitive deck that's designed to win, then you're going to need to run a bit more win conditions, because this is not a deck that I meant to win any games. But it's still pretty fun, so I hope you enjoy it. So the first card I want to look at is Zedruu herself. I guess the first thing to note is that she puts us into a really interesting color combination. Blue means I'm going to have access to lots of counter spells, and white means I have lots of removal and some protection abilities. Red doesn't give us much. I think I've only got like 5 or 6 red cards in this deck, but some of them are really good, so whatever. So her abilities here are really interesting. We'll start with the one on the bottom. You can pay 3, target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. So there are some obvious applications for this. You're going to try and give your opponents some stuff that hinders them more than helps them. But if you're building this deck like I am, then maybe you're actually going to give them some helpful stuff, because you're just trying to help keep them alive. The first ability here is what makes her really good. At the beginning of each of your upkeeps, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanents you own that your opponents control. So I don't think people realize just how good that one is, because you really don't need to build around Zedruu to make her amazing. If all you do is give away 1 or 2 permanents, then you're gaining 2 life and 2 extra cards every turn, and that's just insane. If you were ever to build just a straight up red, white, blue control deck, you could play Zedruu as the general without, going all Donate happy on her. You can just sort of play 1 or 2 cards that work with her ability, and she's going to be really good, because that first ability there is insane. But yeah, I do build around her Donate ability as much as I can. I've got some abusive ways to do it and some friendly ways to do it, so you'll see. It's really fun. So I'm going to start with the fun stuff. These are the Donate targets I have, and all of these serve to give my opponent a really nasty effect. I think this is what people have the most fun with when they're playing a Zedruu deck. In this deck, however, I'm sort of using these as punishment cards when people are sort of not playing fair. I don't just sort of give these away at random. So this first one here, Illusions of Grandeur, sort of the iconic Donate card. When it comes into play, I gain 20 life. When it leaves play, lose 20 life. So the idea is that you play it, gain the life, and then donate it away. And then you can either destroy it to make that opponent lose 20 life, or you can sort of stack that cumulative upkeep and then donate it, so that you control the upkeep, but your opponent controls the life loss trigger. This next one here, Pyromancer's Swath. Basically, it's going to make someone discard their hand every turn, which is pretty nasty. Really, the bonus they get there is not going to be helpful at all, so this is going to work pretty well. And yeah, this one's pretty mean, so you're only going to give this to someone who's drawing way too many cards. Maybe Mr. Consecrated Sphinx or something. This one's one of those cards you got to be careful with, though, because if you cast this and then someone responds by killing Zedruu, then you're stuck with a bitch of a card. Rust Elemental. This goes to the guy who's playing way too many mana artifacts. They're forced to sacrifice an artifact every turn, and if they can't, they take 4 damage. So this one's pretty mean. You gotta be careful, because if you play this, you are going to be taking 4 damage every turn from the guy swinging at you with Rust Elemental. Taniwa. This guy's kind of random. So for 5 mana, 7/7 trample phasing, beginning of your upkeep, all your lands phase out. It took me a while to figure out how this works, but basically, when you give this to someone, they alternate controlling Taniwa and their lands. So basically, whenever Taniwa is unphased, their lands are going to be phased out. The cool thing about that is it means that they're never going to have access to the mana and Taniwa as a target at the same time. So they're going to have a really hard time actually killing this guy. So I guess you're going to give this to someone who's, I don't know, casting too much stuff, so they're only going to have access to the lands every other turn. Pretty funny card in this deck. This one here is actually really nasty, Celestial Dawn. Basically, it's going to turn all of their mana into white mana, and then they can use that white mana to cast all their spells. However, because of the rules in Commander, if they're playing a non-white commander, that white mana turns into colorless. So if you give this to a player who doesn't have white in their deck, then they can no longer generate colored mana, which is really, really nasty. Statecraft, this one's actually really fun, and this one's pretty fair compared to Celestial Dawn. Just prevent all damage dealt to and by creatures you control. So give this to the player who's getting a bit too dangerous with all of their aggressive creatures, and then that's going to stop them from hurting anyone. The cool thing about Celestial Dawn and Statecraft is that it's okay if I control them for a few turns, because they're really not going to hurt me. They're actually going to help me. Whereas Pyromancer Swath and Rust Elemental, I'm going to want to give those away right away. Recently they errated Thought Lash, which made me die a little inside. This was a card that was, you could use it sort of the same way as Illusions of Grandeur and basically kill someone with it. It was kind of hard to convince people I was playing a friendly group hug deck as long as this was in my deck, so I'm pretty sure this got errated because of me. Anyways, it doesn't work anymore, just in case you didn't know. Okay, so you don't always have to give away really nasty stuff like those cards you just saw. There's lots of ways to donate stuff that isn't necessarily mean. And with Zedruu, you want to donate as much as possible. It doesn't necessarily have to be those silver bullets, because you just want to have people holding your permanents so you can draw a ton of cards. So Vidalcan Plotter here, this guy's really awesome. Pretty simple. When he comes into play, you get to switch control of a land you control with someone else. And you can use this to screw someone over if you want. It can also sort of screw you over. The goal of it is just to get someone controlling one of your permanents. And if it's a land, then it's unlikely that thing is going to get destroyed at any point. So that's something they're going to be holding the whole game. So that's really useful. And then of course you get a 1/1 Dork, which is cool because you can donate him away. And any free permanent you're sitting on that you can give away is always a good thing. Gilded Drake, just an obvious choice for this deck. He's a really efficient creature in blue, and I would consider running him in any blue deck, but a deck like this where you want to give stuff away, he's especially good. And then the bad version of him, Chrome Shell Crab. You're paying way too much mana for this ability, but it's okay because he still works really well in this deck. You don't always have to switch control of the crab, you can give them something else if you want, but it's just more bodies to give away and more stuff that's going to help you draw some more cards. Carrying on with my creatures, I really don't have very many creatures in this deck because they're not really good to give away because people just will chump block with them so that you don't draw any cards. So you don't want to rely on donating creatures, you'd rather give away other stuff. But anyways, Mnemonic Wall here, pretty efficient just because I'm running so many instants and sorceries in this deck. And any way to get one of those back is good, but then the fact that I get a 0/4 Dork is great as well because I can give this away. And usually this is something they'll be grateful for because they need it to block. And then I'll be drawing cards every turn off of it. Snapcaster Mage, kinda in the same vein. I'm running so many instants and sorceries that he's just going to be awesome in this deck. And then I get a 2/1 Dork that I can give away. Stoneforge Mystic, another creature with a good come into play ability. I have 2 equipments in this deck, but they're just so good that it's worth running this guy to tutor for them. And then I end up with this Dork that I can donate away. So, yep, pretty good. Hannah Ship's Navigator, kind of a weird choice. Usually you see her as a general, and you don't often see her in the main deck. But, like you saw, all of those crazy donate targets I have, a lot of those are enchantments. So, using this to recur my Pyromancer Swath or my Illusions of Grandeur, she's pretty useful. I've also got some really good enchantments like Solitary Confinement and some other really nasty stuff you're going to see later on. I added her to this deck when I realized just how much I was relying on enchantments to win, or did I say win? To moderate the board, and I also realized I just had no way to get them back, so that's why she's in this deck. Kind of a silver bullet and a really interesting choice. Okay, so like I said, the main role of this deck is to moderate the board and to prevent other people's decks from getting out of hand. So I've got a lot of effects here that sort of stop players from doing their really nasty stuff. Rootwater Thief, kind of a small effect in this format, but I've grown to like this guy. You can use him to extract a card from someone's deck every turn, and what this is going to do is sort of preemptively get rid of those tooth and nails and time stretches and exsanguinates that people tend to rely too heavily on. So, not a very strong card, I guess, in this format, but I have a lot of fun with him, and he sort of sends a message that we don't really want you to play with that card in this particular game. Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir, sort of a really awesome card in this deck because I'm running so many counter spells, and I don't want anyone else to mess with them, so he's going to make it so I will be the only one controlling this deck. Stranglehold, one of those really good red cards. Tutors are some of the most degenerate cards in this format, I think. In a singleton format, anyone with access to like Demonic Tutor or Enlightened Tutor, whatever, they're usually going to search up their win conditions. So this is really going to slow the game down just because people won't be able to get access to their best cards as often as they usually do. And stopping people from taking extra turns, that's just something everyone can agree on. Second Sunrise, one of those white cards that really doesn't see enough play in this format. This is a really powerful effect, and nobody ever sees it coming. So basically I get to undo a Wrath effect. And this is good if I think that someone blew up the board when it really didn't need to be blown up, and if I want people to get all their stuff back. So it's kind of a fun card to sit on and, have an ace up your sleeve. No one will ever see this coming, so it's just a really awesome effect. Lightning Greaves, one of the two equipments I have in this deck. This one is just to protect Zedruu because sometimes people actually realize just how good she is and they'll kill her, and I don't like that. So this is also really good for Hannah Ship's Navigator and Rootwater Thief because those are creatures I actually want to keep on the battlefield. Solitary Confinement, another one of the awesome hidden gems in white. I think this should see a ton more play in this format, but it really doesn't. Basically, I have to skip my draw step and discard a card every turn, but it's going to be an Ivory Mask and a Worship. Prevent all damage dealt to me. So I like this because I like to set up a pillow fort with this deck. I want to sort of operate behind this bubble without feeling endangered. And the cool thing with this is that Zedruu will have no problem dealing with that drawback because I'm drawing so many cards every turn. And this will also combo well with Land Tax, which is another card I'm playing, or with Hannah Ship's Navigator. There are just so many ways to get around the drawback with this. You should really consider running it in your deck. Also, I can donate it to someone to stop them from getting mind twisted or whatever. It's a useful card that people can be grateful for sometimes. Telepathy, what the hell am I doing with this in my deck? This is seriously one of the most hilarious cards in this format, and I think people should consider playing it more often. Ostensibly, it really doesn't do anything, it just sort of makes players play with their hand revealed, but actually that's a lot. Like, you can predict, you know exactly who has a counterspell, you know who is building up to the tooth and nail, so you know exactly how you want to play out your turns and what you want to save your counterspells for. This is a big pain in the ass, like it's a logistic nightmare, getting everyone to lay down 7 cards on the table and make room for their hands so that you can see them. And people will really hate you for playing this, but it fits the deck so well. It lets me moderate everything. I get to be the big brother, and I just love this card. You don't want to donate it, obviously, but you can if you want to, have fun with it. But there you go. Definitely play this card, okay? Here are some cards that let me dig through my library. I just mentioned Land Tax. This card is really good, and it should go in almost every white deck. This deck actually only has like 8 basic lands, but really that's all you need for Land Tax. It's just going to guarantee that you hit your land drops every turn. And I combo it with Solitary Confinement. I also run it just because it's an awesome donate target, and people will be really friendly to you if you give this to someone. So that's one way that you can help one player get out of Mana Screw, which is one of the least fun things in this format. The same is true for Weathered Wayfarer. You can give this guy away to a white deck, and they will thank you for it. In this deck, he just helps guarantee I hit my land drop every turn. I've got a couple utility lands which work really well, and I'll get to those later. But yeah, he also combos with Solitary Confinement, and he just makes sure that if I need to, I can start donating lands without missing my land drops, so he's really useful. Wild Research, one of those, I guess the only really cool card you get access to if you play this unique color combination. So this is a weird card from Apocalypse. You get to gamble for an enchantment or an instant. And like I said, the silver bullets in this deck are all enchantments, so this will help you get your crazy donate targets and a bunch of your spot removal. And then instants, I've got a million of those, counter spells and Path to Exile, that kind of stuff. And yeah, this can get a lot of the cards in my deck, so this is a really, really good card. One of those interesting gems you get access to in this color combination. Enlightened Tutor and Mystical Tutor, I don't need to talk too much about these, they're obviously really good in this format. Enlightened Tutor is going to get mana rocks and all of my silver bullet enchantments. Mystical Tutor, counter spells, spot removal, wrath effects, that kind of stuff. Sunforger. Okay, so we know how amazing this card is in red-white decks. I think a lot of people by now realize it's probably the best equipment in this format. The only thing that can make it better is if you play it in a blue deck, and in that case it becomes absolutely insane, because then you have a Sunforger that can fetch counterspells, which, trust me, is just completely unfair. So this is the reason I run Stoneforge Mystic, and this is another reason I run Hannah Ship's Navigator, because people don't like playing against a blue deck that has Sunforger. So yeah, this thing is, along with Wild Research, one of the main reasons you want to consider red, white, blue, because it's just completely unfair in this deck. And yeah, feast your eyes on the counterspell suite in this deck. This is really kind of nasty. I just cannot play a blue deck without playing a massive amount of counter magic. Some people don't like counterspells. I think they're okay. They're one of the few ways you can deal with almost any card in the format. I just like to control this deck, and if you're playing a policeman deck, then it's your responsibility to stop anyone from resolving Tooth and Nail, Time Stretch, Myojin of Night's Reach, that kind of crazy stuff. I'm not a jerk with these counter spells. I don't counter stuff that's just, you know, trying to help the player get mana or whatever, but I use these mostly to moderate the board. And the amount of cards you're drawing off Zedruu, you're going to guarantee you've always got a ton of counter magic at your disposal. So I've got 15 dedicated counter spells here. You could even run more than that if you wanted to. So I've got the hard counters here: Counterspell, Arcane Denial, Dream Fracture. I love hard counters. Forbid is just really nasty in this deck because you're drawing so many cards. The buyback is no problem. Fairy Trickery, Spell Crumple and Hinder. I don't tuck Generals very much in this deck just because I don't think it's really necessary unless someone's playing, I don't know, Arreo. I guess she just got banned though. There's really no Generals that deserve to be tucked right now. Pact of Negation and Foil. If I had extra ones, I would sink Force of Will and Misdirection into this deck too. Rewind is good because then I get mana left to donate something with Zedruu. Cryptic Command, as usual, is awesome. Absorb, Double Negative, and Suffocating Blast. Normally you wouldn't run these because they're just not that great, but when you have Sunforger, you can only fetch red and white instants with that. So you need to run some multicolor counter spells if you want to have access to counter magic with Sunforger. So that's why these three are in here. Suffocating Blast is actually pretty underrated. I think I would run this even if I didn't have Sunforger. So Counterspell and Lightning Bolt for 4 mana, that's pretty solid. And then the king of counter magic, we have Urte. Another really good target for my Lightning Greaves, actually. So, yeah, people don't like seeing this guy hit the table, but I think he's fun. So on to our spot removal. Obviously an important part to a policeman deck, and this is where our white cards become really useful because white is awesome at spot removal. Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. I don't think I would build a white deck without these. You know, they're not versatile, they can only hit creatures, but they're just so efficient, and their drawbacks are really negligible in this format, so I would run these in any white deck. Red, White, and Blue is cool because you get access to Dismantling Blow and Orange Thunder, which are both really cool cards. So this is just single target removal for artifacts and enchantments, plus some really useful kicker effects. So draw some extra cards and deal some damage to a creature. One of the cool things that people do with Zedruu decks is they play a lot of auras, because then they can stick them on a creature and then donate them away. And if another player controls an aura like this, then it really doesn't matter because it's still stuck on that creature. I guess I'll take a moment to say, do not play Oblivion Ring or Journey to Nowhere in this format, because those cards are just really lame. People will always play them, think they're really versatile, but then what happens is that someone plays Austere Command and blows it up, and then it turns out that the only permanent left on the board is the card that was hidden underneath Oblivion Ring. So Oblivion Ring and Journey to Nowhere, they generally just serve to protect a creature until the next Wrath effect, but don't run them because they're really not that good. What you should run instead are Faith's Fetters and Arrest. These cards are actually both really good outside of Zedruu. You don't need to abuse the donate to make these good. So Faith's Fetters, it's going to stop a creature from attacking and stop abilities, and Arrest basically the same thing. The cool thing about these is that you can stick these on a general, and that kind of works better than like a Path or a Swords, because that player can't just stick that general in the command zone and recast it. They've got this general stuck with an enchantment on it that makes it next to useless, and they don't have access to that general until someone wraths the board or they destroy the enchantment. So these are actually going to work better than a regular spot removal spell for killing generals. And like I said, these work really well because you can donate them with Zedruu and draw some extra cards. Prison Term works kind of the same way, so can't attack or block and stops activated abilities. The trigger here kind of makes it so you don't want to donate Prison Term, although in my experience it really doesn't hurt much if you do donate this to someone, because they're never going to move it onto one of your creatures. Like, what are they going to do? Stick it on your Snapcaster Mage or something? I mean, it doesn't really matter. So all these cards kind of do the same thing, and they all work really well in this deck. Just don't run Oblivion Ring. White also gives us access to some sweeper effects. I'm trying to go pretty low on the sweepers just because people just don't like having the board reset over and over again. And with the amount of counterspells and spot removal I run, it really shouldn't be necessary to sweep the board that often. I'll only really do this if things get out of hand. So we have Austere Command, which is just the best white sweeper in the format, and this would also go into any single white deck I build. Chroma's Vengeance, pretty solid just for consistently destroying all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. And then Rout, I would play this in any white-blue deck, since having access to an effect like this at instant speed is definitely a huge advantage. A couple other random cards here. We have Capsize, which is just insanely good in a blue deck. Bouncing permanents plus buyback, really, really good. And Paradox Haze, another really random card that just happens to work well as Zedruu. So you can use this to enchant a player and give that player an extra upkeep step. So what you do is you use this to enchant yourself, obviously, and then you're drawing double cards and gaining double life off of Zedruu. And then the cool thing about this is that you can donate it to someone once it's in play, and that doesn't change the fact that it's enchanting you. I've had this screw me over a couple times. Some people think it's funny to drop a Braids while I have this in play. Yeah, those are the players who tend to get Illusions of Grandeur donated to them. But yeah, there's some funny stuff you can do with Paradox Haze. Definitely one of the coolest cards you can run in this deck. Onto my mana rocks. I'm running all the cheapest ones. A 3-color deck without access to green is going to have trouble with acceleration. Luckily my deck isn't necessarily trying to accelerate anywhere fast, so it's sort of fine just playing one land a turn. Coalition Relic is awesome in a 3-color deck, especially one that doesn't have access to green. Just really, really good. Soul Ring, they're easy to come by now because they were in the commander sets. And then I'm playing the Signets. Normally I don't really like the Signets, I don't play them in many decks, but in a deck that doesn't have access to green, which has a lot of tricky casting costs like Cryptic Command, then I think they're okay. And then the last two cards, I sort of lied, this deck does have a way to win. Frenetic Efreet and Chance Encounter, this is a combo. The way this works is you can stack Frenetic Efreet's ability 1,000,000,000 times, and then when it resolves you flip 1,000,000,000,000 coins, and you're pretty much guaranteed to win at least 10 of those flips. So this combo is to have a Chance Encounter with enough flips on it to win the game. I don't actually use this to win the game though. What I do is I play this combo, put 10 counters on chance encounter, and then donate it to another player. So basically I'm forcing another player to win the game, and I don't know, I still consider that my win because it's a pretty hilarious way to end the game. I don't play this combo if I draw into it really quickly because it's just kind of stupid. I use this to end the games that are going on far too long. And the way this deck plays, stopping players from getting anywhere, the games can sort of go on too long. So it's nice to have a way to end the game in a deck that has virtually no win conditions. And I think this is just a funny combo, and forcing another player to win the game is just a hilarious thing to do. So moving on to the lands, most of the lands in this deck help fix my strange mana base, so I've only got a handful of utility lands in this deck. These two are kind of necessary in Zedruu, Care Keep and Springjack Pasture. These are two lands which you can use to create 0/1 tokens, and the cool thing with this is that they give you access to more permanents you can donate away. Like I said before, it's not great to donate creatures because people tend to just chump block with them, but when you're giving someone a 0/1 kobold every single turn, they're going to have trouble getting rid of them. So these are useful just for giving you access to more things to give away. Reliquary Tower, obviously a must in this deck, especially if you have Paradox Haze out. Mistral Plains is really important in this deck because, let's see, you have Sunforger. You need to be able to recur those counter spells since you only have access to 3 counter spells that work with Sunforger. You need this with Wild Research. You need this with Weathered Wayfarer. There are a whole bunch of effects that sort of cycle through the cards in your deck quickly, and Mistral Plains will make sure that you always have access to those. And then Core Haven, just another sort of policeman type card to stop attacking creatures. And then the rest of the man base. I don't really have all the lands I need for this deck yet, but I've got enough to go on for now. I've got my 5 color lands. Forbidden Orchard isn't really meant to combo with anything, but I don't really care about giving away free tokens, so whatever. I've got the M10 Innistrad lands, Teleria West, Vesuva, Temple of the False God. Zendikar fetch lands, because those are easy to find. Filter lands, Pain lands, a couple shock lands. Vivid lands, they're kind of slow, I kind of hope to get rid of those soon. And enough basics to work my land tax. So that's the deck. What the deck is going to want to do is get Zedruu out as soon as possible, hopefully with some backup protection. She's going to want to get out her best friend's Reliquary Tower and Paradox Haze so I can start drawing a ton of cards. And then I'm going to play around with her Donate ability. So I could just donate some useless stuff, like a used up creature with some come into play ability, like a Stoneforge Mystic or a Snapcaster Mage, or I can give away some auras which are already attached to creatures, or I can do something like swap lands, or I could just give away some 0/1 dorks. So those are just sort of designed to feed Zedruu's ability and not necessarily have any effect on the board. Or if I want, I can give away some friendly targets. People really like getting a land tax or a wall to help them block some attackers, or like solitary confinement, which I can use to protect someone from getting mind twisted. But I think what people really want to do with Zedruu is donate some of these really painful enchantments. So make someone discard their hand, make someone unable to cast their spells, make them not able to do damage. These are some of the really nasty things you can do with Zedruu. In this deck, I sort of just use those to punish the players who really deserve it, so I don't necessarily push them on people who are just playing fair, because really this deck is just meant to moderate the board. And one of the best ways I can do that is by getting one of these crazy engines out that Red, White, Blue has access to. So Wild Research and Sunforger, when you're running counter spells, these are both incredibly good, and Mistral Plains makes sure you never run out of gas. I'm running all sorts of effects that help me moderate the board without counter magic. So Telepathy, Teferi, Rootwater Thief, Stranglehold, these are going to stop players from doing things before they even have a chance to do them. Yeah, these things are definitely on theme, and they're a lot of fun to play with. People don't necessarily like having their hand revealed, though, so just keep that in mind. Lots of spot removal and sweepers. Ridiculous number of counter spells, that's just my thing. And I have no set way the game is going to end. I kind of like ending the game with a chance encounter, giving that away to someone. But if I can't do that, then I'll sort of just let the game end in a natural way, I guess. I don't want to stall the game out to the point where people are getting bored and sick of having all their stuff countered. So I'll usually let someone win if they're not, doing some cheesy tooth and nail crap. But sometimes I'll just get my ass kicked because people don't like having all their stuff countered, and people don't really believe I'm playing a group hug deck when I give them illusions of grandeur. But whatever, I pretend I have good intentions at least. So I hope you like this deck, and maybe you'll have some good ideas for your own Zedruu deck. Zedruu is definitely one of the funnest commanders in this format, in my opinion. So yeah, thanks for watching.